They began as slaves, but became one of the most feared military forces in history. The Mamluks weren't born into power. They were taken as boys, sold into servitude, and trained to fight. Yet these very slave soldiers would go on to rule Egypt, defeat the Mongols, and create one of the most resilient regimes in medieval Islam. In an age dominated by kings and emperors, the Mamluks turned a system of bondage into a pathway to authority. Their story is one of brutal discipline, battlefield brilliance, and political ambition. The word Mamluk means owned in Arabic, a reflection of their origin as purchased slaves. The system began under the Ayyubid dynasty in the 12th century, but it flourished after the Mamluks seized power in 1250. Young boys, mostly from Turkic or Caucasian regions, were bought or captured and brought to Egypt. They were converted to Islam and underwent years of rigorous military training. Unlike traditional soldiers, Mamluks owed their loyalty not to bloodline or tribe, but to their military masters and units. This created a brotherhood bound by discipline, merit, and shared identity, an elite warrior caste forged in hardship. Mamluks didn't just train, they were reshaped into living weapons. Their education was intense: horseback archery, swordsmanship, endurance drills, and combat strategies. They also learned religion, language, and court etiquette, preparing them for leadership. From a young age, they were isolated from society to ensure loyalty only to the state. This separation also created an internal culture of unity and code among Mamluks themselves. They trained in barracks called khans, living as soldiers even before joining the battlefield. The result? A highly disciplined, professionally trained army that could outfight most regional powers of their time. The Mamluk military was organized in a complex hierarchy. At its heart were regiments of cavalry, each under a commander called an amir. Heavy cavalry was the Mamluk specialty, knights in chainmail wielding curved swords and lances, charging with precision and coordination. They also excelled in horse archery, allowing them to adapt to both open field and guerrilla warfare. The Mamluks maintained strict codes of conduct, with punishment for failure and reward for valor. Battle formations, ambushes, and flanking maneuvers were part of their tactical genius. Their military doctrine combined discipline, flexibility, and intimate knowledge of the enemy. What made the Mamluks truly unique was that they didn't remain mere soldiers. Through the military system, many rose to political power, even becoming sultans. After overthrowing the last Ayyubid ruler in 1250, the Mamluks formed their own dynasty. Leaders like Sultan Baybars and Qalawun had once been slaves themselves, yet they commanded armies, signed treaties, and governed vast lands. This wasn't just social mobility, it was institutionalized ascent. In a rigid feudal world, the Mamluk system allowed military merit to trump noble blood, and their rule wasn't brief. It lasted nearly 250 years. The Mamluks weren't just rulers, they were defenders of the Muslim world. In 1260, they famously defeated the Mongols at the Battle of Ain Jalut, marking the first major Mongol defeat. They also expelled Crusaders from the Levant, capturing key strongholds like Acre. Their success wasn't just due to military strength, it was also diplomacy, intelligence gathering, and deep knowledge of enemy tactics. Under Mamluk rule, Egypt became a center of stability, culture, and trade. While their origin lay in slavery, they stood as shields against the greatest threats of their time. Their legacy was one of defiant protection. Over time, however, the Mamluk system became its own worst enemy. The very structure that allowed slaves to rise also fostered internal rivalries. Sultans were often overthrown by their own generals. Factionalism weakened unity. As new Mamluks were imported to replace aging ones, loyalty shifted and corruption spread. Despite their might, the system lacked long-term stability. Still, they managed to hold power for centuries, adapting to threats even as internal decay set in. The Mamluks left behind a legacy far greater than conquest. They proved that discipline, strategy, and training could overcome even the lowest status. Their architecture still stands in Cairo. Their military reforms influenced Islamic armies for generations, and their victories shaped the fate of nations. Most of all, they shattered the assumption that only nobles could rule. The slave warriors of Egypt wrote their names into the chronicles of power, not as victims of history, but as masters of it. And they remain one of history's most fascinating contradictions: men who were owned, yet ruled;